I don't know why I can't help doing that. You know the old Nelson Mandela dance to this. You know the one where he's got his elbows up to his midriff. He's moving them from side to side. Honestly, that is the dance to do to the real sounds of Africa. Once again, kicking off our World Football phone-in. We're talking about football in Asia and South America and players from over there playing in our leagues. We've got Johnny Duerden, our Northern Soul, over in KL. Are you this morning?
No, good morning, Dustin. I'm in the Lion City this morning, the Lion City, otherwise known as Singapore.
Oh!
Yeah.
Oh, the city where you might get flogged if you spray some graffiti on a wall. What, chewing gum as well, yeah. Yeah. Have you been flogged there yet?
I haven't been flogged yet, but it's still time before I go home, so let's see.
And I wasn't thinking of that kind of flogging. I was thinking if somebody had flogged you anything off the back of a lorry or anything like that. Well, there's more than one kind of flogging, isn't there? It's more than one kind. In South America, the legend Dino, we can hear him already laughing his head off in Rio, taking care of any questions you've got on South American football and players from over there playing in our leagues. Good morning.
How you doing? I was trying to do that Nelson Mandela dance you were talking about. But
try it.
Yeah. Well, we're all out of Africa.
Yeah,
we all are. That's where we all come from.
But
some of us are out of Africa for a lot longer than others.
No,
so
don't
I think
be cheeky.
It came more naturally to you than
no,
it did
hang
to
on.
me.
I've been out of it longer than you've been in it, mate. Trust me. I've been out of it for over 50 years, me. Anyway, and you don't have to have the colourful shirt to do the dance, by the way, as much as Nelson Mandela did his best.
I can do that.
Oh, yeah. In fact, talking of your supply of colourful stuff, there has been a question here asking or demanding that you give us an update on hair salons over your side. We'll come to that in a minute, okay? We'll come to...
Do I have to?
Yeah, of course you have to. Hair today, gone tomorrow, as they say. Yeah. Well, we'd love to hear a grown man cry. But unfortunately, we won't be able to see it. So let's talk about the question that has dominated already our phone in this morning by text and email and tweets. 08085 909 693. Feel free to join us. 08085 909 693. And serendipitously, this question involves both of our pundits in South America and Asia. Gentlemen, I'll say one word, Paulinho. So, Richard says, Paulinho leaves China to move to Barca. Discuss for both Northern Soul and the legend Dino. Rishi, Newcastle upon Tyne, says, what do you think of this move? His transfer fee seems rather high for a 29-year-old who's recently been playing in China. Also, this one from Bill in Astor. Well, so many people have talked about this, actually, and lots of spuds have gotten in touch about this as well. And they've got in touch about another question that I'll come to in a moment. Did you want to take this first of all then, Johnny? Paulinho from China to Barcelona after failing at White Hart Lane. What made the difference?
Well, I think from an Asian and Chinese point of view, this is quite an exciting development. I mean, it's interesting also the effect that the Neymar transfers has all around the world, the knock-on from all of that. But the transfer fee is quite high, I think 40 million euros, but I think that was the release clause in his contract, so Barcelona had to pay that if they wanted to sign him. And it's a good bit of business for Guangzhou to sell a player for over 3 times what they paid for him. But yeah, it's good news for Chinese football in the sense, okay, they've lost a good player, but I mean, one of the concerns that has been expressed around the world is that if you go to China, if you're a famous player who goes to China, and not only China but other Asian countries, then if you're playing for a big international country, then it means it spells the end of your international career, and it's almost a second home.
That's why everybody's asking these questions. They look at Asian people going to Asia for a payoff, especially China, for a big payoff, but not for them to develop their skills over there and come back to play the world's best team. What went on?
So, I mean, he's been in China, he's certainly since he arrived in the summer of 2015, but certainly since the start of 2016, he's been the best player in the Chinese Super League. I mean, consistently, he's been excellent. Probably in the whole of Asia, you'd have to put him down as week in, week out. He's performed really well. And of course, China's not on the same level as the big leagues in Europe, and nobody would suggest even in China that they're anywhere close. But it's not a given to come to a place like China and be impressed, because many famous and good players don't. I mean, look at Carlos Tevez, who's been almost the opposite of Paulinho, and even a bigger name, a more expensive signing, Jackson Martinez, who came to the same Guangzhou team as Paulinho, and has really struggled to impress. So I mean, he's come and he's been a perfect import. I mean, he not only performs on the pitch, he helps his teammates. He gives week in, week out 100%, and he's started to score quite a few goals as well. And I think even the team's fans are really sorry to lose him. In the season's now, the quarterfinals of the Asian Champions League next week, the first leg, the top of the league with about, there's 8 or 9 games left. But there's a recognition that, if he can go to Barcelona and perform well, and lots of people think he will, I know the reaction in Spain is maybe not quite so excited, but if he can go and perform well, then it will really show that you can come to China and not only play your way back into the Brazilian national team and impress for Brazil, but maybe get a transfer to one of the biggest teams in the world. So hopefully he will do really well, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah, this was the kind of question that you were getting last week, Tim. You've had a week to think about it, and now you're on with the Northern Soul. I wonder whether you've managed to come to terms with what's happened here and kind of can explain why and how.
Well, yeah, I mean, people who just remember him from his spell at Tottenham will be amazed. Anyone who's watched Brazil over the last year will not be amazed at all, because he's been in cracking form for Brazil. And he scored a hat-trick away to Uruguay. When Brazil went behind in a game, they really need to dig deep. And he scored a hat-trick. He's been scoring goals, he's been making goals, and he's been contributing to the midfield marking. And he's a player, I would hate him to be judged just by what he did at Tottenham. And he's a player with considerable virtues, but also with weaknesses. And with the Brazilian national team, he's got a coach who knows him very well, who worked with him very successfully in Brazil when they won everything possible to win. Knows exactly what he can do and knows what he can't do. And what he does do so well is the timing of the run into the opposing penalty area. What he doesn't do particularly well is pass. He's not a great passing midfielder, which makes you wonder, from the point of view of the Barcelona move, I've got 2 possible problems with it. And one is on how is his style going to dovetail with the style. Now, I think this is a bigger question about Barcelona. Exactly what their style is now is something of a question mark. And I think that their style has been a little bit undermined year after year with that front 3, because they were a team effectively of 11 midfielders, and then they became a team dependent on the individual genius of the front 3. And now one of the front 3 is gone, another's injured for a month, so we don't quite know what their style is, but they are historically a passing side, so you wonder how he's going to fit in to the Barcelona lineup. The fear in Brazil is that what's going to happen in the run-up to this World Cup is exactly what happened to him in the run into the last World Cup, that he loses form at the wrong time, as he did when he joined Tottenham in the run-up to 2014. The other worry I'd have from a Barcelona point of view is this is the 3rd time he's been to Europe, and he really hasn't enjoyed himself on the previous 2 occasions. He hasn't done well, and he hasn't liked it. He hasn't settled, and perhaps being so important in China, perhaps that was good for him. It brought out the best. When he's going to be just one of a bigger squad, I think he's quite a quiet lad, quite an introverted lad. Perhaps that doesn't bring the best out of him. The bigger picture that I'll ping back to John perhaps is the exodus to China has it's caused a doubt in the mind of the South American national team coaches, because what do you do? Do you bring them back? Because if you bring them back for World Cup qualification, it's a long, long way. It's a really long trip to come back. They're really clocking up the air miles. So there's been a kind of division of opinion on this. And some of when the players have gone to China have thought, well, that's it, I've forgotten them. But the 2 Brazilian central midfielders, and the 2 important central midfielders, are both China-based. Paulinho no longer, because he obviously just moved to Barcelona, but also a player perhaps not particularly known to the English audience, but vitally important to Brazil, a player called Renato Augusto, who is the midfielder who links the play. He's the passing midfielder in the engine room for Brazil, and he's China-based also. And it really hasn't been a problem over the past year for Brazil having these 2 based in China. Do you think, John, in the long term, this is just not going to be considered a problem? That people are going to be able to go to China and retain their national team place?
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully that's what's going to happen. I mean, it's a sign of how things have changed. I mean, you just mentioned, to have the Brazilian midfield based in the Chinese Super League would have been unthinkable just 3, 4, 5 years ago. And it's a real sign of how the globalised football is becoming. And I think maybe it could be the case that Chinese football could be a little bit gentler than the top European leagues. There's slightly less games, especially not in the Asian Champions League. So maybe it's a little bit easier for the players to combine an international career. Of course, the travel is an issue. But I think certainly the standards of the top teams, I mean, Paulino's working with Scolari. Well, he was working with Scolari in Guangzhou. You've got top coaches now, Pellegrini's, in Lisboas, famous coaches all over. Capello's managing a team in the relegation battle now. So you've got the good coaches, facilities are great. The pitches leave a bit to be desired sometimes. The standard can be up and down, but certainly the football is improving. And certainly, if Paulino can also go to Barcelona and perform well, then it reflects very well on the Chinese Super League and and the extension Asian football as a whole. And hopefully, more good players will come and not see Asia as an international dead end or a semi-retirement home, but a vibrant place to come and play and earn good money, yes, but also have a good career.
Yeah, thank you very much to Dean, by the way, who sent me a text earlier on. You know that the Irish Prem plays on a Friday evening, and he says, just watching Cork City versus Sligo Rovers. The young lad on the right is doing well. Looks like he got solid advice from maybe an uncle. Thank you for suggesting that, Dean. And they won 1-0 indeed. But this is from Donald.
Clean sheet, well done.
Absolutely. And he has to take the credit for that. I hope he'd score a goal, though. He needs to bang a couple in as well. Donald is saying, and this is so fascinating, this question, I've been waiting to talk to you about this for a couple of weeks now, Johnny, because he says, given the Trump nonsense, his words, not mine, does the Northern Soul have any picture of the Northern Korean love of football currently, or was 1966 in the World Cup the high point? And also, Donald asked about an update on the Vickery Salon. He says an update would be appreciated. If you don't mind, Johnny, we'll take the update first. The important things first,
Well, North Korea takes football.
No, we'll get the hair. Sorry, I know it's easy to think that North Korea was the important thing. It's
easy to think that World War is more than all the money I'm losing on a hair salon.
Let's talk about the hair salon. Let's talk about the hair salon.
Well, she's very good. She really is very good. But I think what we need. Brazil economically is going through a very, very bad time at the moment. I mean, in the little shopping gallery where she has a hair salon, you wander down there and almost everything around her is closing and kind of relocating. So we need a boost from World Football phone-in listeners. They don't have to go if they live on the other side of the Atlantic. I won't require attendance, all the way to Rio to get their hair cut. But if they live in the Rio area, all business is welcome.
Yeah, it's not that kind of a phone-in, Tim, but thanks a lot for advertising it.
You put the ball on the penalty spot for me.
Yeah, the listener asked for an update. It wasn't that kind of a thing. It wasn't sell the salon.
It's got a lovely photo. It's got two.
How much money are you losing? How hard do you have to work to keep it afloat is what listeners want to know.
Extremely hard. I mean, when I'm and obviously I haven't got a pension.
I don't mean to laugh. I don't mean to laugh.
So in 25 years' time, or considerably less, when I'm in a blanket in the street somewhere.
Not just you,
saying,
me too.
Brother, can you spare a dime?
I have to work. I have to work into my 90s, mate. My missus has told me that straight off, and I don't even have a hair salon to support. Anyway,
but you entered 10 years ago. You must be used to it by now.
Let's move on very swiftly. So, what about North Korea, given all the political shenanigans that we've heard over the last few weeks? Johnny, was 1966 the high point of their footballing odyssey?
It was, of course, because they reached the quarterfinals and it was the first Asian team to do anything at the World Cup, and that still talks about not only in North Korea but people in South Korea still talk about it as well. And it's one time there was a North Korean midfield player called An Yeon-hak who was born in Japan, and then he played club football in South Korea, but he was an international player for North Korea, and I went to interview him once at his apartment, and he was, maybe he did it, I don't know, but he had the DVD of that World Cup constantly playing in background as we talked, and he was certainly very proud of it. But now North Korea has always looking to the future and has got some good young players. I mean, what it's done in the past few years is after the 2010 World Cup, is understood that. With football being a very international game and dependent on tactics and everything else, but being so isolated internationally is a real problem for the country in a football sense. And we tried to get around that by sending good young players to schools in football schools like Italy and Spain. Defenders tend to go to Italy, creative players tend to go to Spain and spend a few weeks, some months playing for teams over there, youth teams. And they've also opened, a football school in Pyongyang and invited coaches from around the world, usually Spain, to go and coach kids there. I mean, and one advantage North Korea has is that if you show promise as a youngster in the schools, you'll get funneled into, the football system. And also, not only the boys, but the girls too. And they've got, very good young women's team. They were the reigning champions of under 17 and the 20 World Cup in women. And they've even got some players like this guy called Han Guang-song, who is the North Korean Cristiano Ronaldo, and he's now playing in Italy. And they're really now trying to send more and more players overseas as much as possible. But the isolation is a problem because they don't really play many friendly games. Now only this season the club teams entered Asian club competitions for the first time for a long time. But what they do have, technically very good, very hard-working, real team spirit, and they're always very, very difficult to beat. If they can get a bit more creativity and flair and that international experience, then the future could be very, very bright indeed.
Let's speak to Michael in London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Justin.
Or Gunnar Samaritan, as we call you. Good morning.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. It's a question for Tim. I've spoken to him about Gabriel Palista a long time ago. It wasn't on the BBC website, but according to the Arsenal website, we've now sold him to Valencia. And I wondered what Tim's view on him as a player was, and maybe his view on how he was at the Arsenal, if he knows how he performed at the Arsenal. I liked him a lot. He was one of those unusual central defenders. He had a lot of pace. He could be in the attack, and 4, 5, 6 seconds later back in his defensive role. I really liked him, but I think Arsene Wenger sold him because he's had a number of injury problems and he's potentially injury prone.
Yeah, I don't think Wenger really fancied him. I do like his pace. It can be, I think, the most difficult position for lots of South American centre-backs to come into European football. A lot of South American centre-backs are really slow. And they get away with it by defending so deep, so close to their own goal. So if the ball's played behind them, it's the goalkeepers. When they come to Europe, and especially when they come to some clubs in England, they have to defend much higher up the field. That can be a problem. But I don't think the lack of pace was a problem for Gabriel. And he got himself in and around the Brazil squad. So Brazil were watching him, and they were happy with what he was doing. But he never looked 100% safe to me. I always looked at him when I saw him for Arsenal. I always looked at him and I thought, I don't really trust you. And I always got the impression that Wenger thought the same thing. And he hasn't really taken a step down, has he? Gone. Valencia are a huge club in Spain. I think they've just signed a very good Colombian centre-back as well, Murillo from Inter Milan, who's been linked to English clubs, was linked to Everton and so on, but has ended up there. And I think that the two of them could be a really good South American central defensive partnership. In terms of the Brazil squad, and he's well outside at the moment, but if he stays injury-free and Brazil suffer injuries, then, it's happened before, he could find himself in the World Cup. I mean, in the 1994 World Cup, Brazil lost their top 3 centre-backs on the eve of the competition and had to patch up an improvised defence. So you never know. The call could come, but I think he needs a few injuries for that to happen. And also, as you say, Mickey, he needs to stay fit himself.
And you lot are looking good this season, Mike.
Sorry?
You lot are looking good this season.
Not according to some gooners, conceding 3 goals against Leicester. I mean, they showed a lot of spirit and that, I suppose the test is always going to be away to Stoke. That's going to be quite an interesting one, because I always get the impression Mark Hughes puts out a very physical Stoke against what he doesn't do against other teams.
It's a man's game, It's a man's game, and if you're going to get your ankles bitten, you may as well get them bitten by Stoke.
Yeah, but you reminded me of Mourinho, and a couple of years ago he said Arsenal always complaining about injuries,
Please,
we have injuries, and I thought to myself, but how many, you haven't had 4 players with broken legs in 5 years, so...
But no name calling, behave yourself. Apart from calling people by their Brazilian shirt names, of course. Gunnar Samaritan, thanks very much, appreciate that. 08085 909 693 if you'd like to join us this morning. I genuinely didn't mean to laugh, but it was the first time I'd heard that one. So
it was good.
It wasn't bad. For this time of the morning, it wasn't bad at all. Okay, we've done...
And he just slipped it in, didn't it? It was all in the timing.
He did it very well. That's what those Gooners are like. They like to slip it in where you least expect it. So, this one from Northern Soul from Bill in Astoria, Queens in New York. I recently watched a great mini documentary on the ultras of Indonesian club PSS Sleman. How is it that the second division Indonesian club has such passionate support, and how does their level of support compare to other clubs in Jakarta or throughout the Indonesian top flight?
Yeah, I think last week there was an attendance in the second division of 45,000. Indonesia has huge passion for football, which in some ways is a blessing and a curse for the country, because the passion, people love it so much, it attracts all kinds of politicians and people looking to use the game for their own ends. And this has been a problem in the past, and they've been banned by FIFA for a year. That ban ended in 2016. All kinds of issues with corruption and things even worse than that. But now the season's going well, and the passionate country. You've got a country of about 250 million people who love football, and all over the country as well. I mean, you can go to, it's a group of islands. I mean, it's a huge sprawling country, but one thing that unites is football. And when you go there to watch a game, especially the national team, I remember the first time I went to see a big game was 2007 Asian Cup, that Indonesia co-hosted, and 90,000 people in the stadium. The atmosphere was like nothing I've experienced before. And this season in the top league, you're getting big stars like Michael Essien has come. These are aging stars, and he's doing okay. Peter Odemwingie has been brilliant in Indonesia this season. He's scored like 12 or 13 goals in his first 13 games, and the future is reasonably bright. I mean, if the investment can come, the sponsorship can come, you got so many people playing the game over there. Indonesia really is, a sleeping giant, and probably maybe the most passionate country in terms of football in the whole of Asia, I would say.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
Why aren't the national team better then? I had no idea of that. That's brilliant. Why, if they've got that amount of people, why haven't the national team made more of an impression?
Well, it's a good question. The league system has not been the best in the past. I mean, you had no football at all in 2015 and 16 because the country was banned by FIFA. There's no season. Clubs can't play in international competition, and the national team can't play. In World qualification or Asian qualification, but why the national team never? It just hasn't. I mean, there's not much there's no forward thinking in the game. It's all about here and now. Again, the fans are very impatient. I mean, if you're a big name star like an Essien came this season, he plays in front of 20, 30,000 every week in Persib Bandung, and there's no patience. You have to deliver there and then. And it's just, the politics that surround the game, the corruption in the game have really held it back. Not only in Indonesia, it happens, especially in Southeast Asia as a whole, but Indonesia is probably the worst. But, and you'd hope that in more than China, this is a country that should really, really be, coming to the fore, but it just hasn't until now. But one day, if it clicks, then it really, I mean, we've talked before in China how nobody plays football. That's always been the issue with China under Indonesia. People do, but the money's not there at the moment. But maybe that will change.
At least we now know that Peter Odemwingie isn't sitting outside QPR Stadium waiting for the transfer window to close.
He got lost and ended up in Indonesia. It took a wrong turning
It's
somewhere.
an easy mistake to make. Mark in Concert is suggesting that in North Korea, they reckon that they've won the last 4 World Cups. And do you know anything about that, Johnny? Did they win without us knowing? That they've won the last 4 World Cups and the last 2 European Championships? According to Pyongyang. Yeah, according to Pyongyang. Anyway, there is one story that has caught the eye and ears and attention of our listeners tonight, much more even than Paulinho to Barcelona, and it's the story of a certain Sanchez. No, not that one. Let me put it this way. Terry in Essex wants to know any news on the Spurs signing, and he's not the only one. I'll tell you all about that in a moment.
This is BBC 5 Live, available on the BBC iPlayer radio app. Up all night with Dotun Adebayo.
0808 590 9693 is the number to call if you'd like to join us for this morning's World Football phone-in. 0808 590 9693. We've got our Northern Soul, Johnny Duerden, with us in the city of Singapore, or the city-state, actually, of Singapore. And also we've got the Legendino, Tim Vickery, with us in Rio as ever. So they're talking Asian football and South American football, respectively, and people from over there playing in our league. So give them a call, 0808 590 9693. As we heard in the bulletins there, Liverpool have apparently rejected £114 million, or is it pounds or euros, whatever, deal for Philippe Coutinho from Barcelona. Is that real? Is that real? Well, we'll find out what the Legendino thinks about that in a moment or two. But first of all, let's speak to Michael in South... is it South Ealing, Michael?
No, South East London. Let's get
apologies.
it right.
Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, let's get it right. Is it
Lewisham.
in Lewisham? Well, hey, the People's Republic, you know that. Where exactly in Lewisham?
Blueborough.
I don't know Blueborough. I was in Brockley. I don't know Blueborough. Where's Blueborough?
Brockley. Okay, fair enough. Bit of a posh boy, but yeah, fair enough.
Which ghetto side of Lewisham are you in then?
Well, I'm SE13, so that is bang on Lewisham. But I tell people I live in Blackheath because it sounds better.
I know, it's uptown, isn't it? I know. It's very pretty up there in Blackheath. Not that any of us can afford to live up there. But anyway,
me neither.
Although if you had the kind of transfer fees that they're talking about, if you were a footballer and you had a couple of those transfer fees, you'd be able to probably afford a one-bedroom flat up in Blackheath, wouldn't you?
Well, that's the dream, Dutton. I'm sure Neymar could at least afford maybe a one-bedroom flat in Blackheath on the wages he's on, but yeah.
Yeah, so tell me, what do you make of all of these? Every season it seems to go through the roof, and I blame it on Northern Soul because his team, Blackburn, were the ones that kicked this off. You know, when they transferred Alan Shearer all those years ago for some record fee, and ever since then, it's just gone bananas.
Well, I must say, I'm a Newcastle fan, so I think
you lot followed in his footsteps. Yeah, you did.
It was well worth the money. Let's be honest, he's the greatest striker the Premier League's ever seen. But that's another story.
Newcastle fan in South East London. Yeah. Whatever.
Look,
Let's get it right.
In Gateshead, but that's what I tell people anyway.
Yeah, that's what you tell people. I love it. Anyway, yeah, go on, tell us. What do you think of this?
Yeah, so basically my question was to both the experts. Basically, with Neymar's fee, obviously PSG paid a lot of money to Barcelona. And obviously, when you look at stadiums like the Emirates Stadium and you see half-full stadiums and stuff like that, is football becoming more of a middle-class game than a working-class game? And also, is there, with the more money that's being pumped into the game, is there more of a obligation to put on more of an aesthetic point of view, as in play pretty football because people are paying so much, or is it always going to be a results game?
Okay, just hold that thought, and I want to bring Sean in Essex in because you also want to talk about transfer fees. Just stay with us a moment, Michael. Sean, go ahead.
Hello there.
Hiya.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the ridiculous sort of inflatable transfer fees that are being thrown around at the moment for, whoever you want to make an example of, Coutinho, the Neymar situation, people that we haven't really heard about from the European leagues, 20, 30 million. I'm 38. In my sort of earliest memories, you had Maradona going from an Argentinian club for 5 million to Napoli. That was incredible. Like the Shearer thing you mentioned, 15 million to Newcastle. The thing is now, you've got 20, 30, 40 million deals going on. No one's, let's be honest, has anyone heard of half of these people? It's you've got Coutinho on a third bid, I believe, for 114 million. And I rate him at around 60 million. I'm just sort of saying the fees at the moment are just based on, dependent on what clubs are spending what, and it's becoming ridiculous. Let's be honest.
Tim, do you want to take it first and answer both Michael and Sean's points? And stay with us, both of you, because I'd love to get a response from you both in just a moment or two.
I'm sceptical of the who's heard of these people argument, because it's exactly what was said about Arsene Wenger when he came to Arsenal. Lots of English people, who's ever heard of him? And what an impact he made. And he might well have stayed on too long, but he made a huge impact. And the people are being bought.
You've got people. You've got players being quoted every week in the Premier League. So and so going to Burnley, so and so here and there from, I don't know, Portugal, Spain, Italy. 20, 30 million. We haven't. Let's be honest. We haven't all heard of these people. I'm not saying the fees aren't justified, but have we really heard of all these sort of players?
Well, I'm sorry, Sean. That's your problem. If you haven't heard of someone in a global industry, that's your problem, mate. That's not the problem of the player. That, I think, is totally disrespectful to the players. Having said that, the amount of money
if you could name me 10 to 20 of the players that have been transferred from the European League this season to the Premier League for sort of between 15, 20, 30 million, I'd like to see that. I'm not criticising anything.
And it's also, Tim, I think what Sean is saying, most of us would agree with Sean. Half of these players, none of us have heard of. It's not a question of disrespecting the players.
I mean, you've got a defender going to an attacker, going to possibly to West Ham. Carvalho, is it from, a Portuguese team, or a Spanish? Possibly a £40 million record. Yeah.
But this is a seasoned international player.
114 million for what's the Liverpool player's name again? Sorry,
Coutinho.
140 million. I rate him.
Right. So here we go. You can't even name Felipe Coutinho. I'm sorry, Sean, but you're being disrespectful. And if you don't know the names of these players, that's your problem.
Real Madrid. I'd like to base things on when Cristiano Ronaldo went from Manchester United to Real Madrid for 80 million. I didn't argue with that because look what he's done, 40, 50 goals a season, 60, whatever. But if you look now, 7, 8 years on, you've got Lukaku, 90 million. You've got Neymar, 200 million. You've got Coutinho, 140 million. It's ridiculous. It's becoming ridiculous.
All right.
You're telling me, they're better than Ronaldo? Are they better than Ronaldo?
No, of course they're not.
If Ronaldo was sold now for what he was sold in, whatever, what was it, 2.9, 2.10? What are we looking at? 250, 300 million?
Well, all right. There are two separate things here.
It's crazy, isn't it? You've got 20, 30 million pound players no one's heard of, and...
Well, obviously someone's heard of them because someone's buying them. If you haven't heard of them, that is your ignorance and that is your problem. So that's one thing, but let's leave that to a side. The second thing is the amount of money, which I agree with you, does seem to be absolutely absurd. However, and I'm old enough, I'm a bit older than you, I remember Trevor Francis going for 1 million and everyone's saying this is ridiculous, this is ridiculous. You look at it now and it's small change by what he's paid. The fact is that football generates so much money, and while it generates so much money, the fees can be justified. Now, my fear is that all of this spending is guaranteed on one thing, and that's the TV rights industry. And my fear is that the TV rights industry is not sustainable. We're entering into a world of new media and so on, and I wonder that isn't sustainable. That we're reaching figures which cannot be sustained because with a collapse of the TV rights industry, the game cannot continue to generate the amount of money that it's generating.
And with
at
all
the
due
moment.
respect, Tim, it's not just the TV rights industry. That's the bulk of it. But the other side of it, as we know, this is why Tottenham are building a bigger stadium, is the amount of revenue that you can get in from people at the gate. Now, this goes back to Michael's point, and you're still with us, Michael.
Yeah, I'm still with you.
You know, the point that you were making, that these teams have got to claw back, these clubs have got to claw back some of that money that they're spending on these players. They've got to claw it back somehow, and they do it by putting up the prices at the gate, and it turns the game into, you know,
It's a middle-class game these days. It's coming away from the working classes. It's a middle-class game. Like, everyone knows it. You hear fans complaining all the time about prices. Some clubs like put a freeze on it, but as the more we see like transfer fees like Neymar's, the more prices are going to go up. The more middle class people are going to get involved. Working class people won't be able to afford it, in my eyes. And for me, the best thing about football is, I think Tim's made this point before, many times on the phone in. Anyone can pick up a ball and play. Like, it doesn't matter what background you're from. Like, if you're in poverty, if you're like rich, like you can just put like jumpers down for goalposts. Anyone can play. But like the essence of the game is the working classes because of the accessibility. And I fear that with raising transfer fees, and it's going towards the middle classes and away from the working class.
And Tim, that's
what really worries me about that whole debate is that the rising prices are pricing the next generation of players out of the stadium. That I think is that for me is very, very worrying. But again, and if you look at the figures, and I remember football before the gentrification and so on, the average crowds are much higher now than they were then. So, and it's true, lots of people are being priced out, but they've been more than replaced. Again, I pose the question: for how long is this sustainable? That's the question that those who are running football really have to look at, I think.
And we're going to come back to Johnny. No need to hide in Singapore, Johnny Durden, because at the end of the day, arguably it's the Chinese transfer fees that have helped boost up the whole system. You can talk about that point in a moment, but I just want Sean in Essex to ask the pertinent question, because there is one question that is the elephant in the room, Sean, that you want to ask him.
Well, any example, Coutinho, whoever you want to quote, Johnny Evans quoted 25 million to Man City, this last few days. Can I ask, what do you feel at the moment, without all the inflated prices and all the whatevers, what do you feel Philippe Coutinho is worth?
I haven't got a clue.
I don't want a political answer. I just want a straight figure.
Well, I haven't got a clue. Honestly, I have absolutely no idea. I told you earlier on, I'm old enough to remember Trevor Francis going for $1 million, and everyone's saying this is absurd. No one is worth $1 million.
Yeah, but you've got an opinion.
You're saying
you've got an opinion.
But no, I don't. I don't, because it depends on the amount of money that football generates.
I get that.
And if football generates that amount of money, I mean, I suppose in one sense, the good thing about the Neymar transfer is, there's money coming in from Paris Saint-Germain. That's money that's entering football. That's money that was outside football. It's now coming into football.
I get that.
Barcelona will spend that.
Okay, let's do it this way.
And that will go down into the game.
Let's do it this way.
In that sense, the kind of sugar daddy thing is positive.
As you're so reluctant to nail your opinion to the mast, as it were.
I don't know. I mean,
I know you
haven't
don't
got
know.
a balance sheet in front of me.
I know you don't know.
So it just depends on whether the game can afford...
Let's do it the other way around. Given that Liverpool have rejected 114 million for Philippe Coutinho, you like the way I pronounce his surname, don't you?
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, very good.
Given that they've I did it on purpose, actually, just to calm things down. Given that they've rejected that, how much would Pele be worth today, do you think?
Well, I think he's so old today that, he's had a hip replacement.
I know, you know what I meant.
Very much.
You know what I meant. Him at his height, the pinnacle of his football. Yeah, the pinnacle of his footballing skills today, in today's context, and given that he would have been a lot more physically, athletic and everything else.
an extraordinary amount of money, because he would guarantee titles, he would guarantee massive shirt
200
sales.
million, 300 million.
Well, these numbers, I can't really. There's an aspect of money that I can't take seriously anymore after quantitative easing anyway. On how many trillions are they just? No. This is a serious point. How many trillions do they just invent at the click of a switch to pump into the global economy? I find it hard to put values on things after that.
And
the only answer you can come up with football is if the sport. Well, if the sport can sustain that kind of spending, then why not? But the problem is, in the long term, is it sustainable? And that will be my question mark, that the TV rights thing cannot go on forever.
Yeah, Johnny, I bet you're sitting there thinking, please don't come to me, please don't come to me. Yeah, no, we've got to go to you, because in the last couple of years, it is the Chinese leagues particularly which have inflated the price of footballers. And if, footballers can go over that side for hundreds of million or whatever it might be, or earn that kind of money, then it affects, doesn't it, what happens here in Europe?
Yeah, well, it's a new market, but it's not only the buying players. I mean, Tim mentioned very correctly, the TV rights. You wonder how much longer can TV keep pumping money into the game, but more and more overseas rights for the Premier League are getting higher and higher every time, and a lot of that comes from Asia. And I think the next round of negotiations, the figures are expected to rise all over Asia. Almost every country is paying big money to show live Premier League games every week, and it's not showing any real sign of dissipating. I mean, as I said before, you can go to many Asian cities like Singapore, KL, Bangkok, Seoul, Tokyo. You can watch pretty much every single Premier League game live. You can watch Swansea play, Hull City from it doesn't matter what game, you can watch it, and people are still watching, still paying to watch. And I think more and more it's just become much more important for that kind of thing, not only for the TV but for the tours that the clubs do, and digital things as well. But yeah, I mean, when I look at from the outside, the English transfer market, it just seems crazy. Not just the money involved, but the whole focus on the whole transfer system that is so intense in the summertime. And I think it's just huge. And you do wonder where it's all going to end. And as concerned about the game becoming a middle-class game, certainly in England you can understand why people think that. I think certainly in Asia it's not the case in a lot of countries. It's still, a lot of countries still a working-class game where young working-class men follow it in large numbers. But I was talking to my dad last week, Blackburn now in the League One, and people have to pay over £20 for a ticket to watch them play Doncaster Rovers.
Declaring interest.
I remember being at West Ham about 10 years ago, and they were 1-up against, I think it was Man City, in the last few minutes of the game. And in the row behind me, the fella's mobile phone went off. So he answered his mobile phone, and the conversation was, "Oh yeah, mate, what's your boat like? Is it good?" And I don't think it was Cockney rhyming slang. I think he was talking about the boat of his mate, But it was an East End working class voice. But I thought, my God, football's changed. Now here we are, West Ham hanging on to an important lead, and there's a bloke on a mobile behind me talking about boats.
Yeah, it could have been a rowing boat. Anyway, a little one that you used to get at the park, in the pond in the park. John in Milton Keynes says, prices of players are silly, but they have been for years, including when Ronaldo went. As Mr. Vickery points out, ignorance of so-called unknowns doesn't make them bad value. The market is the market, and that is that. Although VS says respect has nothing to do with it. It's a marketplace where price and worth are separate matters. What someone is valued at relates to what someone else is prepared to pay for them. Whether anyone is worth such a huge sum is a different discussion.
It's a gloriously inefficient market, the transfer market. It really, really is inefficient. There doesn't seem to be much of a coefficient between transfer spending and success on the field. Although there is a coefficient, I think, between wages that you pay and success on the field. But on the transfer market, it is clearly deranged. Clubs buy players for bad reasons. That they sign a coach and they give him lots of money to build the kind of team that he wants, and then 6 months later they sack the coach and a new coach comes in and brings in players that he wants. So it is a silly, inflated and inefficient market.
Yeah, and you Spuds will have to wait a little while before we get on to the other Sanchez, if you know what I mean. Talking
Me
about
and Mr. Sanchez.
Yeah, the transfer fees, Tottenham record there. 08085 909 693. Feel free to call us and talk about any issues with regard to football in Asia or South America, or indeed any issues with regards to those regions. I'm sure our pundits can do their best to answer them for you. Jack, who's exiled in Guangdong, Johnny, says... a couple of questions regarding football or farm teams and satellite clubs in Asia, he says. Firstly, Japanese club Albirex Niigata's team in Singapore. They've been established in the S League for over a decade now and won the title last season. But how many of their players actually go on to play for their J League parent club? What's the benefit to both Albirex Niigata and the Singaporean League in general? I also note that they had a team in the Cambodian League for a season or two a few years back. And the second similar club I'd like to ask about is Chinese Super League club Guangzhou RNF and their HK team, now in their second year. Unlike Albirex Niigata's team, which is solely Japanese, Fuli are required to have a certain number of Hong Kong players and are now also allowed 3 foreign players. After struggling last season, they've dropped the under-19s from their name and focusing more on success than youth development, splashing the cash on some established players such as Beto and Giovanni from Eastern. Are the Chinese players in the team likely to progress to play in the CSL, and what does Hong Kong football get out of it, apart from the dollars?
Well, it's an interesting question. To talk about Albirex in Japan, Singapore, yeah, I mean, Albirex are a J League team playing the Japanese League and also have a team in the Singapore S League. And Singapore has had over the years, and it's quite a small country, it's just a big city and they've got its own professional league. And it has at times invited foreign teams to participate. In the past, there's been a team from Korea and China who came and went, but the Japanese team still exists. There's a team from Brunei who's actually coached by Steve Keane, who used to be Blackburn Rovers manager, and they're in the S League too. And and the Albirex won the league last season, and they're top this season, and they're going to win the league again. There's a debate in Singapore, of course, about whether this is good for the local league to have foreign teams coming and winning, and what it does. And I think there's some people think there should be just a local league for local teams, because as Colin mentioned, these are Japanese players. Singapore players, are not playing for the team. Then they go back to Japan. And then some of them will go and play in the J League, and the benefits for the local Singapore League are very unclear. And I think perhaps we will see an end to that in the next few years. But Singapore football has lots of issues at the moment. It's going through a bit of a downward phase, and the whole debate about the future of football in a country, especially a place like Singapore, which really loves the English Premier League, which again is a debate. Is it that unhealthy for the local game too? We'll have to wait and see what happens.
And Tim, does the Bilardo-Menotti divide still exist in Argentina? Pete wonders.
Yeah, although that divide was on almost kind of aesthetic and philosophical grounds. Menotti, who won the World Cup with Argentina in '78, very much a kind of cafe intellectual who believes that you want to win the right way. Bilardo, who won the World Cup in '86, wants to win anyway. Hide the ball, sneak a goal when the opponent isn't looking, wait for the final whistle. That'll do him. These days, in domestic Argentine football, I think the standard has got lower. And certainly Maxi Rodriguez noted that the Liverpool player, when he went back after a decade away, my God, how come the standards dropped so much, and there is much less emphasis on aesthetic qualities than there was when he played there the first time round. So perhaps the lowering of the league, the lowering of the standard of the domestic league has inclined in favour of win any way you can. Be very interesting to see what happens with the national team now. They've appointed Jorge Sampaoli. The ex-Chile boss had a good season with Sevilla last season, and is a coach who really wants to attack, really wants to play in your half the field. Does he have the defensive resources to do it, or will he leave the team too open defensively? That's going to be the big question for Argentina's run-in World Cup qualification.
Richard says, I don't know about Trevor Francis that you referred to, but I remember everyone kicking off about Martin Peters for 200 grand. I always quote,
right, yeah.
But I always go for the Alan Ball one. I think, was it?
Indeed.
Was it 180 grand?
I think Alan Ball was 220.
220 to Arsenal from Everton.
Plus a pair of white boots.
Well, yeah, those ones that could turn on a sixpence, or they turn like a sixpence.
That's
right. I remember kids having that at school. I remember kids, the 1 or 2 kids that could afford that at school got slaps for it as well. They got proper slaps because everybody else was jealous, man. I never ever knew what it was like to be able to spin on your football boot like they did, you know. I never knew what it was like. Those lucky kids, eh? Difference between, it's a north-south divide. It was in Tottenham anyway, North Tottenham versus South Tottenham. South Tottenham's very posh, in case you didn't know. It's almost Stamford Hill, whereas up in North Tottenham is a proper ghetto. And we could only afford those football boots that you could get from Woolworths that were more like rugby boots in those, you know, the sort of ones that went halfway up your ankle.
Do you remember how long the laces were?
Oh,
the
they were
laces
very long.
Used to go on forever.
And we used to
they're
enjoy,
impossible to tie.
Well, no, we used to enjoy tying them over and 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 over again around our ankles. We used to love that. That was the best thing about those football boots, the size of their laces. And Paul points
in
out
mud afterwards.
Paul,
horrible.
Yeah, indeed. Those were the days. You know, the football grounds were different in those days. Do you not know? Do you not know?
Across the UK.
This is BBC 5 Live. Up All Night with Dotun Adebayo.
And you're listening to the Up All Night World Football Phone-In. As we're talking about football in Asia and South America and players from over there playing in our leagues. We've got Johnny Duerden, our Northern Soul, with us in Singapore. We've got the legendino Tim Vickery with us in Rio as well. Love you to join in. Paul says, says Pogba, not the same Paul, I'm sure. Pogba at night, you never know. That's what I had to say before I said Pogba. I said, sorry, what was that, Johnny?
Maybe you can't sleep tonight, Paul Pogba.
Anyway, so Paul says Pogba at 90 mil is 17% of Man United's total revenue compared to Dennis Law, who costs 61% of total revenue, he says. Transfer fees are just numbers the clubs carry on regardless. Mark says in major US sports, the TV money is so huge that gate receipts are an afterthought. Fans are more there for atmosphere. And incidentally...
Yeah, see, I thought that would happen to English football at one stage. I thought that was the way that things were going to go. You know, they get all the money from TV and end up just kind of letting people in for token amounts. But obviously, it hasn't worked out that way at all, has it?
Not at all. In fact, one of our listeners suggested, or is wondering why all these other countries buy in the English Premier League when their own, you know, why don't football fans over in Asia, for example, Johnny, watch their own football? Is the Premier League so much more of an attraction?
It's a good question, and one that many people debate. I think when you look at the Premier League, it's marketed so well around the world, and it has been for a number of years. And you know, people find it an exciting product, and people want to be part of it. You know, and I was in Thailand a couple of years ago talking to the owner of quite a big team there called in Bangkok Glass. And this was a time, you know, Thai owners starting to get involved in English football. And he said, I asked him this question, and he said, why? I said, well, because, you know, you buy in ready-made teams in England. You do it in Thailand, or you've got to build it over years and build it from almost nothing. But you buy in ready-made teams with history and prestige. It's exciting. You know, you're part of a new club, you know, an international global team. And people like to be part of a global conversation as well. But yeah, certainly it can get a bit galling for local fans when you see, you know, Southeast Asian and Asian businessmen spending huge amounts of money in, you know, in already rich leagues in Europe, but you know, not doing the same at home. But you know, you can't force people to tell them where to spend their money.
No, you can't. But there is a conundrum here, Tim. You often talk about the cultural relevance of or football's cultural relevance and how you can define a culture's impact on the football that is played in that region. And I wonder how we then transfer our cultural imperative of football to another country, because there's so much about English football, the way that we play, the way that it's organised and everything else, that people will have to get their heads round to really fall in love with English football. You would have thought.
It is a terrific spectacle, and you just look at the results of the first weekend. You know, you got lots of goals, and you got strong teams in some cases losing to teams that are theoretically much weaker. It looks great on the TV, especially with the full stadiums and the presence of the fans close to the pitch. And it looks absolutely. It's as a TV product. It is fantastic. And one of the things which is intriguing about it is that it's a global league. now with players from all over the place. So, you know, from wherever you're watching,
that was the point
you
that
might
Johnny
have
was
some
making.
representation.
That
but
was
it's
the point.
also, despite the fact that it's got players from all over, it's also recognisably English. And that seems to be a winning combination. It's recognisably English in the fact that the teams are playing to win most of the time, in the atmosphere which is created inside the stadium. So it manages to be global and English at the same time.
Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, my wife is South Korean, and she wouldn't be interested in going to a K-League game, but from time to time she'll happily watch a Premier League game on TV, partly because she loves to see the fans behind the goal and the reaction of the fans. It's all part of the drama that you don't often get in many leagues. I mean, she's been to a Premier League game. I took her to her first game, Blackburn, when I was playing Stoke. And she wasn't impressed.
DIVORCE, surely.
She plays on TV, I think, and... But yes, I think I mean, it's fast, and you know, they said the full stadiums are a big part of it, and this is true. Last night I was in a taxi, and the driver asked me where I'm from, and because of the Premier League, I can say I'm from Blackburn because people will know that at least the name Blackburn. And he said, "Oh, why didn't Jack Walker sign Zinedine Zidane in 1990?"
I'm impressed with that. Okay, let's get on to this Sanchez question that so many people have been asking. Who is Davinson Sanchez, and is he any good, says DL. Andrew says, I think we'll need Tim Vickery to give us spuds a full scouting report on Spurs' new boy Sanchez tonight. Ashley says, can we have your opinions on Sanchez, please, tonight, and anything more that you can tell us about him? Tim's thoughts on the Colombian defender, Davinson Sanchez, as he's being strongly linked with Spurs. Well, he's been transferred there apparently now. That's from Neil, and Davd has also said that as well. What can you tell us about him?
Well, he's clearly not the best player ever to play for Tottenham, although he's a club
record
signing.
Is he worth
which
42 million? Is what our previous caller would ask you.
Yeah, indeed.
Tell me how
which
comes
does bear out.
I've never heard of him.
Well, it's an inflated transfer market and bears out the points that were made by our friends and listeners in the first part of the programme. But I like him. He's still very raw. And he only became a first-team player in Colombia in February of last year. He got into the Atlético Nacional side in Medellin. It's a big club in Colombia. They sold one of their centre-backs. He came into the side there at the start of that campaign in February. He stayed until the end of July, by which time his team had won the Copa Libertadores, so they'd become South American champions. Ajax picked him up. And he had 1 year at Ajax, which culminated in the Europa League defeat to Man United, where he did very well. So he's still very raw. You know, he's had a year and a half as a first team footballer. But what I like about him as a centre back is that he's quick, which means that he can play in a high line. He should be better in the air than he is. He's not nearly as commanding in the air as he should be. 6'2", he's got a gangling frame. I've seen him undone on crosses too many times. He's only played twice for Colombia at senior level. He played in a World Cup qualifier against Argentina. He played the first 45 minutes of a friendly a couple of months back against Spain. Both times he was undone on crosses. That's a worry for me. He's still raw, so he's likely to make mistakes. Also, and if Pochettino is thinking of him for a back three, it's a formation that he's very rarely played. I've only seen him play in a back three once when Atlético Nacional experimented with it, and he really didn't look comfortable at all there. So I think there's a lot of work to be done with him on the training field. He's nowhere near the finished article, but I think he's one for the future. I think it will help him a lot that he's got two other ex-Ajax centre-backs there, Vertonghen and Alderweireld, to help him bed in. So I wouldn't expect him to be first choice right from the start. I'd only expect him to be first choice to start with if Pochettino does go with a back three, and that will take a lot of work on the training field to get that one right. But a good centre-back for the long term for Tottenham, especially because of that speed. So if you want to press and you want to play a high line, he's a centre-back who can do that.
And how long will it be before he has to go out, or will he have to go out to be farmed off in China before being signed to Barcelona?
Well, hopefully we can cut out the middleman we can cut out Johnny D's middleman and just sell him on to Barcelona at an enormous profit.
Talking of which, Johnny, long-time listener, first-time contributor, I'll be at work, so sorry I can't call. Question for the lads about Cerezo Osaka. I'm originally from Manchester, MUFC, okay, and have watched the team for 5 years, but now I live in the south of Osaka. So, firstly for John, we've done a great job, or he says, wow, we've done a great job so far in J1. Can I ask you about the new Korean coach, his connection to the club, and his signing of Croatian Matej Jonic? What a player. Just a little background about his K-League connection, how good the coach is.
Well, they've got a coach called Yoon Jung-hwan. Korea has a decent connection with Cerezo Osaka. I mean, this club has never won the J-League title. They famously, very famously, in 2005, they were top of the league in the last day. Going to the final day of the season in J-League 2005, 5 teams were within 1 point of each other at the top of the league. And Cerezo were top. And they conceded a goal in the last minute, and they drew the game, and they dropped down to 5th in the last minute of the season, from 1st to 5th. And to make it even worse, Gamba Osaka, the city rivals, won the league on that final day. And Cerezo haven't really recovered from that since. They signed Diego Forlan, I think, in 2014, and they thought he would be the missing link to take them to the first ever title. But they got relegated instead. And now they're back in the J-League doing well. New coach is Yoon Jung-hwan. He's had some success in Japan with Sagan Tosu. He likes physical teams and, a bit more of a direct manager. He came back to Korea in 2015 with Ulsan, did okay, but didn't really pull up any trees. He was kind of thought to be the next big thing in Korean coaching, but hasn't really fulfilled his early promise. But he's doing well with Cerezo, and hopefully they can get a first title. I mean, they've been working really hard over the years to get it.
And also, Tim, any idea about SPF 50 Plus's hero, Sousa? This is Elias Barbosa de Sousa. I've never seen a flame-haired Brazilian, says our listener.
Yeah, he gives the ball a good strike, Sousa. There aren't many of them. Me better half, before she decided to lose all my money with a salon, many years ago, she was a teacher out in the working class suburbs of Rio, and she had a flame-haired kid in her group, and she loved the flame-haired kid. And I told her in England, he would be chastised, and his parents would be thinking about flushing him away down. But no, she thought it was absolutely great. So Sousa, the flame-haired Sousa, stands out as an attraction with his with the colour of his hair, and his Duracell-like lung power. And he really gives the ball a good whack.
Easy on your descriptions of how we behave over here. Okay, easy on that, because things have changed since you were.
And quite
Britain.
rightly so.
Yeah, absolutely,
absolutely. Your barbaric habits have moved on. I'm very glad to hear it.
And I don't eat. I'm not going to say that, actually. Let me leave that one out. Otherwise, you won't be hearing from me again on this programme. Matt and Ben from Manchester and Norwich. But now Osaka are the ones who gave us those questions. And Mark says, can John help me decide who I should support, please? Also, what are your views? Well, hear him out, first of all. He's another Man United fan, and he's travelled quite a lot. And he has followed United, Real Sociedad and Hanoi FC in his travels. But who should he... he's just moved to KL, Kuala Lumpur. So who should he support now?
Well, KL, I mean, as a capital of Malaysia, hasn't had a huge amount of success. Most of the bigger teams are just outside. There's a team called KL Kuala Lumpur who in the second division of Malaysia in the Premier League, and they're probably going to get promoted to the Super League for next season. So I would suggest supporting Kuala Lumpur. Or you can go nearby to one of the giants of Malaysian football. Is a team called Selangor. The nickname is the Red Giants, and sometimes they get huge crowds when things are going well. But I think maybe supporting Kuala Lumpur. I find it hard to say, actually, Chloe. I have to stop myself saying KL. You can't, and then support KL, the local team, and hopefully next season the top division level will have a good season.
And could you ask Johnny to tell us why Mike Havenar hasn't got a call up for Japan recently? This is from Anton.
Oh, well, Matt Havenar is an interesting case because he's Japanese. He's born in Japan, but his parents are both Dutch. I know his dad a little bit. His dad was a goalkeeper. He went to play in Japan, I think, in the 80s, and his his mum is also Dutch, and I think she was a professional. She's an athlete, she's a heptathlete, I think. And so his dad was called Dido, and he's a really nice guy. And so they loved Japan so much they stayed, and they became Japanese citizens. And they have, I think, at least two boys, and Mike is a striker. He's Japanese. He's about 6'4". So that when he became a professional player, there was real hope in Japan that maybe we've got ourselves a guy who can 6'4", he can score lots of goals, and he's done okay for the Japan national team when he's played, but. What tends to happen when he does play, he hasn't played for a while, is Japan often go long ball and he doesn't quite suit their system, and they see a big man in attack and they're tempted too much to sling in high crosses. But he hasn't played for a while. I think he was in the Netherlands playing in the second division, but he's back in Japan now with Vissel Kobe, and hopefully he can get some decent playing time and get back into the team.
Okay, what do you know about Matabeleland, John?
Not much.
Oh, how about you, Tim?
No, very, very, very little. Wouldn't be my specialist subject on Mastermind.
Well, you're going to have to put your feet up, both of you, because this is a long email, yeah? Long email from Phil, who is in Livingston. He says it's a cool night in Livingston, Zambia. And he says, later today, Matabeleland play their first game on foreign soil, literally, and against FFA Global Maramba. They're a team set up by the Swedish-based NGO FFA Global and a local NGO within the community, established to provide young people with an opportunity to empower themselves whilst participating as a member of a team. Incidentally, as I type, Matabeleland are travelling on the road and expect to arrive at the border by 8 a.m. The previous 2 weeks have been my first in Zambia, in fact, first non-Saharan venture into this great continent, or sub-Saharan if you like. Working with the youths and children making up the two Maramba teams have been a remarkable experience, to say the least. Any apprehension before stepping foot onto the plane was extinguished quicker than the dark of the night creeps up on this land once the sun takes shelter under the horizon. So we've got a little bit of poetry in that. I'm being you say beautiful, but he says, I'm being very reserved in any description of the personal experiences and friendships I've made whilst here, as my level of literature could never do them the service they deserve. Come now. On the field, we've unfortunately tasted two defeats in the last week, both against tough opposition and on very challenging, hard, dry soil surfaces. Lucky Livingston Pirates. Are they called Lucky Livingston Pirates, or is it just Lucky Livingston Pirates have kindly given us... Oh, I see. I still don't know, actually. I wonder if they're called Lucky Livingston Pirates. He just says Lucky Livingston...
Do you think it's Lucky Lee?
No, it's not Lucky Lee. It's either Lucky, Livingston Pirates, but there is no comma, so he says Lucky Livingston Pirates. That's why I'm saying it as if the name is Lucky Livingston Pirates. Yeah. And when I say that about anybody, it was like when I did the obituary of Lucky Dubé, who his demise suggests that it was the wrong name to call him. I'm always a little bit wary of that. Lucky Dubé, a great artist, don't get me wrong, but sadly he died and, was shot to death and so on. So you're always a little bit wary when you start off saying Lucky, it's like, Lucky, anybody called Lucky, there's going to be a twist to the end of the story. So I don't know yet. Should we get to the end of this email? We might find out. Did you fancy getting to the end of the email?
I do, yeah. I'm anxiously awaiting.
How about you, Johnny? Are you anxiously awaiting or just not bothered?
We've gotten this far, I think we should go to the end.
Yeah, this is true. So, Lucky Livingston Pirates have kindly given us their pitch for the historic Lucky, Livingston Pirates. No, let's just leave it as it is. Lucky Livingston Pirates I just don't know which it is. Sometimes English language...
The World Football Phone has never dwelt so much on punctuation, ever.
I know. But there's a first time for everything. Lucky Livingston Pirates have kindly given us their pitch for the historic occasion and will host what I anticipate will be a truly great spectacle later. A life a million miles away from what can easily be a chaotic existence in Faslane Naval Base. This is what I deem living. It isn't the weather that will have made this trip so unique to the rain-ridden dwellings of the United Kingdom or the relative humble cost of living. Not even chronic diarrhea. You had to get onto the chronic. You know what's coming next, guys. Hold your noses. Not even chronic diarrhea has attempted to blot the Lion King-esque daily sunsets. the constant hospitality. By the way, that chronic diarrhea, it's not all over Africa, okay? You just don't drink the local water if you're not used to it. The constant hospitality, the warmth of a hand of gratitude, and the sheer want to play football has defined Maramba during my brief stay. The reality of crime, danger, drugs and alcohol abuse are a societal problem with a great work behind the scenes by a few incredible people who are giving people a chance in life. I've not even spoken about Matabeleland, but their desire to compete and field an international team earns my respect. I'll attempt to call in from Johannesburg next week to hopefully convey the experience in far greater detail. I'd like to focus on the blatant talent in Africa. Wi-Fi's not the greatest in town. Take care, lads and lasses. If Mina is there, of course, the lasses bit. Yeah, well, he didn't throw in a question. Lovely. I was hoping that we'd get a question at the end of that, but we didn't. So,
well that's a running one. That's a running soap opera. We're going to get the next instalment with more beautiful descriptions this time next week. And I found that quite touching. The importance of football in a community. That was great. That's the kind of thing that this show is all about. Stories that you perhaps wouldn't hear anywhere else.
And neither
thank
of
you very much for the email.
Because neither of you know anything about Matabeleland. Neither of you corrected my pronunciation.
Well, no, I thought at first, well, that doesn't sound right, but I think he probably knows it better than I do. So
you're still,
who am I to correct a son of Africa on his pronunciation?
You are still of the
arrogance
impression.
has limits, you know.
Yes, you are still of the impression that there is some of that African sunshine in my loins. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? After all these years, mate.
Please, I really don't want to think about your loins. Can we move on?
Leave my lions. Loins and lions. It's a very difficult one. We're talking about the grammar. Leave my lions
the
out
loin
of this.
king.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go back to Nick in South London who says, could Tim please talk about... That was actually very clever. That was very good. That was very good. At this time of the morning, that was... I'll give you a penalty for that one. Anyway, Nick in South London says, could Tim please talk about the impact of the absence of Mexican teams from the Copa Libertadores this year? I know it's not your region, but is it something that
no, it is because the Mexican clubs have been invited into the Libertadores since, I think, 1998.
Yeah.
They've been kind of hauled in geographically from North America, because Mexico actually geographically is in North America. They've been hauled in to South America. And now this year, under pressure from the clubs, CONMEBOL, which is South America's UEFA, has extended the calendar of the Libertadores. It used to be played just in the first half of the year. Now, trying to get more money, trying to make the thing more lucrative, they've extended it. So it started in January, it'll go on to the end of November. But they didn't consult anyone before they did it. And they didn't consult the Mexican clubs. And as a result, the Mexican clubs, they just couldn't see how the dates could coincide. So the Mexican clubs pulled out. Now, this is an absolute disaster in financial terms, because Mexico is a huge country, massive population, massive TV market, bye-bye. So at the very moment when they want to increase revenue, they've lost Mexico. Now, surely this is only temporary. They're going to have to rethink this, and they're going to have to do some consultation. So the effect financially, I think it's been a massive own goal. On the field, we're now down to the last 8, and it's been absolutely Brazil-Argentina dominated. And there was a risk that the last 8 would be exclusively Brazil and Argentina. In the event, one team from Bolivia and one team from Ecuador got through. So we've got a situation where in one half of the draw, it's 3 Argentine clubs and 1 from Bolivia. And in the other half of the draw, it's 3 clubs from Brazil and 1 from Ecuador. Now, the Mexicans, because the Mexican football is so strong financially, it's got a lot of very good South American players playing there. The Mexican clubs are good. And they're also very attractive to watch. So I think the tournament has lost out financially, but it's also lost out on the field. And I tend to think that there will be a rethink about this calendar, because when they came up with the idea of extending the Libertadores, losing Mexico was the last thing on their minds.
I tell you what, I've got another long email, so put your feet up. This is for you, Johnny, on Thai football. I lived in Thailand for a year and a half spanning, this is from John, by the way, for you, Johnny. Another tongue twister, but I'll get around it somehow. I lived in Thailand for a year and a half spanning 2012 to 2014. I was living in Nonthaburi in the north of Bangkok, and Muang Thong United were the local team and one of the best in Thailand at the time. I believe they're still very strong today. The Muang Thong United shirt, and he sent me a photograph of that, I bought from the club shop at the stadium, bears a striking resemblance to Man United's home kit. Indeed it does. Pick attached on the back of the shirt, which reads MT United, MTUTD, like Man United. And is a clear copy of a certain Man United design from the mid-2000s. Anyway, Muang Thong United even have a chant, glory, glory, Muang Thong United. Anyway, glory, glory, Muang Thong United, sung slightly awkwardly but entirely charmingly in the same rhythm as the Man United chant it's copying. Wondering if there are any other clubs in Asia and or South America that is blatantly trying to copy an identity, aesthetic image from more famous clubs from other parts of the world. And for your information, Johnny, Johnny mentioned Bangkok Glass. The last time I saw in Thailand was Muang Thong United versus Bangkok Glass. Muang Thong United won the game at home. Bangkok Glass fans pulled out and stole a bunch of seats from the ground. It was great. So, Johnny, any other teams you can think of in Asia very quickly to try and...
Well, compared to Muntong United, Uwara Reds in Japan have very much a Manchester United themed shirt. There were certainly times when it looks almost exactly the same, I'm sad to say, but they would be the ones that stand out.
Yeah, and you love the way, Tim, that Johnny corrected my Muang Thong to Mung Tong. So
Mung Tong, Mung Tong,
come on. Don't do your Spike Milligan, please. We don't do that anymore. We've left those days behind. Yeah, absolutely. So please. Gosh, I've got to watch...
English-style stadium. If you ever get to go to Bangkok, just north of Bangkok, the stadium's like 18,000. It's really English-style. It's a great place to watch football.
And Tim, over in South America, any teams emulate or, just nick the...
Well, lots started. There's an Everton over here in Chile. There's a Liverpool in Uruguay. There's a Rangers in Chile. Independiente in Argentina wear red shirts because of Nottingham Forest.
But do they nick the aesthetic?
No, not really. No, because they're old enough now to have developed their own traditions. Football was implanted here really by the British, but that's 100 years ago. They've had plenty of time to establish their own aesthetic.
You've got plenty of time to join us for the rest of the World Football Voting this morning between now and 4 o'clock. 08085 909 693 is the number to call if you'd like to join in. We're talking football in Asia and South America and players from over there playing in our leagues.
First for news and the best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live. Up all night with Dotun Adebayo.
And with Tim Vickery, the Legendino in Rio, and with Johnny Duerden, the Northern Soul, who is in Singapore for us this morning. A couple of points of order, if I might reflect back. Gentlemen, it's part of the issue with transfer fees, not that the pound has devalued so much against the euro, so when English clubs buy, their pound is worth less, says Paul in Belfast.
More evidence for seeing a grown man cry. Earn pounds.
Sounds like Tim...
They don't go as far as they used to.
Sounds like Tim has had 3 shredded wheats this morning. This is one of our listeners. And Alan says, you're not going to comment on that one then?
No. Other breakfast cereals are available, I'm led to understand.
Yeah, but 3 shredded wheats, you can't beat those. Alan says the argument is spurious. Nobody had heard of Thierry Henry, but he became a global legend.
And at the point, yeah.
And Richard, the milkman, says...
Well, someone had heard of him because someone bought him when he was at Juventus, for crying out loud. I mean, the no one had heard of him. It was almost as if, the idea is you just hauling someone off the street and saying, well, here's £40 million. It doesn't really work like that. It's a global industry.
This is true. Richard, the milkman, says, with regards to football becoming a middle-class sport, all I would say is that I used to watch Spurs in the 70s travelling from near Southend with money I'd earned on my paper round. Imagine doing that today. Right. Mind you, we used to get a half return to our nearest station, then get off for Seven Sisters, saying we got on a Black Horse Road, never failed. For those of you who cheeky. For those of you who wonder at the geography, basically, they used to travel a long way and pay for going one stop. Basically, that was the importance of that one. Okay. Lots of other questions as well for you both. Kelly in Oxford says, thoughts please on League One teams such as Oxford United's Pep Clotet success, failures at giving foreign players experience of English football, league-style football, and if they saw the wonder goal from Gino Robert Van Kessel on loan from Slavia Prague in Oxford United's first home match of the season. So
I have to confess I didn't, but I do know that they've signed a Brazilian left back or left wing back, Ricardinho, which will be interesting because he's getting on now. He's kind of early 30s, and I remember him at Curitiba as a very kind of Brazilian-style attacking left wing-back. You know, the kind who couldn't really do defending, but will be looking to make the pitch big and get forward. Now, he's been in Europe for a while, and he's worked with this coach elsewhere, so the coach knows exactly what he's getting. But I'll be very interested to see how he gets on, because he's not the kind of fullback that you imagine in English football.
Yeah, and Johnny, I wonder if you wanted to comment on this, because you know a lot about League One football at the moment, don't you? Or is it Champions?
I don't know anything.
Is it Championship or League One? Anyway, we'll speak to Simon in Woking. Good morning, Simon.
Hi.
Hi, you all right?
I'm okay, thank you, yes.
Good to speak to you.
First time calling.
Oh, welcome to the show in that case.
I just wanted to ask the question. I'm very flattered by the fact you think that Woking are a League One side, but they're actually a National League side.
No, I wasn't talking about Woking. I wasn't talking about... I was trying to have a dig at Blackburn Rovers, but it's all lost now. It's all lost now, don't worry. It's all lost.
But I don't know whether Johnny is aware of this, but for the first time, I think a Korean company has actually got involved with an English club. It's a company called Sportizen, and they're about to take over, or they're in the process of taking over Woking Football Club. I guess I've got two questions. One is, do you know anything about it? And two, what can we expect in the way of a culture from a Korean investor in an English football club? I mean, are they looking to invest their way up the leagues, or are they looking for a way in for Korean players?
Those are the crucial questions, aren't they? Absolutely, Johnny.
Yeah, well, Sportizen, I don't know the company. Sportizen sounds very much like a company name a Korean would choose. I think it's a good name. But yeah, as for the motive, certainly there's a chance that it will be seen as a good way to get young Korean players with some experience in an English football club. Of course, the issue is always going to be they won't be able to get work permits because it's much more difficult now. But still, you can certainly have loans and get coaches and some kind of exchange. But I think there was a Korean company that got involved with the team in Belgium. It might have been in the Belgium second division a couple of years ago, and they certainly tried to get some Korean players over there. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, Korean culture in a corporate and football sense tends to be quite strict and hierarchical and almost military style. So it'll be interesting to see if that carries over or if they try to introduce some of that at all. But yeah, I'll keep an eye on that and certainly take a look and see what's being said in the Korean.
That bought took over AFC Tobias of the second tier in Belgian football.
Oh, that's the team I was talking about. Yeah, okay. Same. I think there will be some exchange of players, and I think it's interesting that we've seen a lot of Chinese involvement in clubs all around Europe, but none at all from Korea. And there's some very big companies in Korea who have a global ambitions. But I think that what Korea doesn't have, what China does have, is maybe the political incentive for companies to get involved in European teams and the network. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see what happens. I'll keep an eye out for that. Good luck.
Good luck. Is that the best you can say to him after your Venky's experience? The best you can say is good luck.
Maybe it's an omen.
Well, good. They should have great food in the cafeteria, I think. Very healthy, very delicious.
Yeah. That's the best you can hope for. Keep your fingers crossed, Simon.
I will.
And keep us in touch with what happens as well. Feel free to call any time.
Keep an eye on Woking.
No, we will actually, and great questions as well.
Okay, cheers.
And incidentally, I'm not just saying that about Simon's questions, because this is always the pertinent questions whenever a foreign conglomerate or company takes over a British club. Is what do they have in mind? Are they doing it? I mean, Charlton can has experience of this kind of thing, as you know. And you always wonder, are they looking to sort of make a profit? Are they looking seriously to try and get the team up the leagues and to benefit the community and to make the local fans who have followed the team for most of their lives delighted? Are they looking to invest, or are they looking to take money out? And also, are they looking to be hands-on, for example, or hands-off? That itself is a dilemma for a lot of fans when somebody comes...
What balance would John make about the Venky's thing with Blackburn? And posing these questions that you just posed, how would you answer that one in terms of their involvement with your club?
Well, I mean, as many people know, it's been pretty disastrous. I think when they first got involved, I think, for the fans, it's kind of, you're torn between optimism and wondering maybe will be some serious money invested, and a little bit of trepidation about what could happen. And of course, through bad decisions and absentee owners and all the rest of it, and it's been a very damaging time for the team. But Venkers are still involved and showing no signs of wanting to get rid of the club. That they don't, they never come to Blackburn to see the games, and communication is almost non-existent. So yeah, I mean, I think certainly now, we talked before about the English football becoming more and more globalised, and people are interested in getting involved. I mean, a company like Venky's getting involved in a team like Blackburn would never have happened without the rise of the Premier League. But it's at best a double-edged sword, and for some teams have done very well. You look at Manchester City, and other teams less so. But what can you do? I mean, this is where it is. I mean, these clubs are being sold at a price, and people are paying the price, and sorts of fans. And good luck to everybody, really.
Yeah, I don't get it. What I don't get really is just how a business... I don't know how it works. I don't know. But if you invest in a business, the last thing you do is cheese off your customers. It's the last thing you do. It's the last thing you do. I mean, let me just leave that to one side. Because, as I said, it's not just about...
Well, it does make you wonder what the objective is, doesn't it?
I know. I do not get it.
I'm mystified.
Yeah, because it's not just about Blackburn. As I said, Charlton are in exactly the same or similar situation. Josh in Hertfordshire says, does Tim think there'll be a move to Europe for Luan soon, and where does he think would be best for him?
I think he's a terrific player, really, really good player. Plays for Grêmio in Brazil, and he's 24 now, which comparatively late. He's a little bit of a late developer because he really came through first just over 3 years ago, and it's taken him a while to consolidate himself. But he's the best player in Brazilian football at the moment, and what he is a player who plays kind of behind the main centre forward. He can play right up front, but he's better off the main striker, given a free range, and he's one of those players who just links the play so well. He's a little bit like Nigel Clough. The way that Nigel Clough used to just drop and find space between the lines. He was a little bit like a kind of Crewe railway station. Everything went through Nigel Clough when he was at his peak. And Luan is like that. He's clearly going. Whether he goes in this transfer window, well, we'll find out in the next 10 days. There's now talk about maybe Sampdoria in January, which would allow him to stay with Grêmio for the concluding stages of the Libertadores. He's just got into the Brazil squad. I heard this week actually a little bit about his private life, and it came as a surprise to me because he looks like a kind of choir boy. But apparently he's built up a little bit of a reputation for nighttime excesses, which may be putting clubs off, because he's been linked with Liverpool, he's been linked with Arsenal, he's been linked with other clubs, but so far he hasn't gone. If he doesn't go now, he will certainly go in January, with Sampdoria of Italy looking like the leading candidates.
Yeah, maybe he could go to a team where there is no nightlife. There's one or two teams like that I won't mention for now. But Riquelme was also like Crewe station, wasn't he? Because I know you used to love him. He was like one of my favourite midfielders, Riquelme. Everything went through him.
Luan is just a little bit higher up the field. He's a support striker rather than an attacking midfielder. But they are similar in that sense of just linking the play so well.
Richard in Oxford says, my question is for both your regions. Who was the best defender of all time in your regions, and who's the best defender at the moment, seeing that defending is a dying art form, he says at the moment? John, do you want to go for that first?
I think it's harder, isn't it? Yeah, go on, John.
Ooh. of all time, certainly, probably you could look at Hong Myung-bo. He, of course, is South Korean. He was a captain of the 2002 World Cup semi-final team. And his nickname in Korea is just like the Eternal Libero, and he was just a very, very classy player. He was captain. He played, I think, in 4 separate World Cups, and just a great guy all around and a real talisman of the team. I think historically he would be certainly one of the best.
And currently?
Oh, currently, that's a good question too. There's some good defenders in the Iranian national team, and Iran have become a really good defensive unit under Carlos Queiroz. Haven't conceded a single goal.
That's impressive.
In the final round of
That's impressive.
qualification. I quite like Jalal Hosseini. He plays as an old centre back. He plays in that team. He's 34, 35 now. He plays for Pacific Police, and he's a real kind of warrior at the middle of the defence. He's a good player.
And what do you make of this suggestion that, from your region, that dying is a dying art form? Sorry, defending is a dying art form. Apologies, Freudian slip.
Well, yeah, I mean, defensively, if you look at World Cup qualification now, I mean, we're coming to the end of it in Asia, and Iran's already qualified, and we could have the other 3 teams in place in the next couple of weeks. And if you look at, apart from Iran, like South Korea, Japan, Australia, defensively, they've got all kinds of problems, and the team's getting weaker and weaker each year. And I fear for some of them when it comes to the World Cup, because defensively, all sorts of issues with them. Only Iran is a team well organised, stable, got a good coach, and everyone knows their jobs. But even the other top teams in the region have real issues in that regard. So you have to say defensively, Asian teams are not going to be a good patch at the moment.
All 3 questions to you then, Tim, from your region.
Yeah, I think defending is harder these days, because you can't kick them into row Z like you used to be able to. The resources open to the defender are much less. And part of this has to do with blanket televisation. When we were kids, there was very, very little football on TV, and football is really cleaned up its act as a spectator sport as a result of its blanket TV coverage, which is where the money comes from, just to link this question into the first half of the show. If I have to choose one, well, I'm a huge fan of Passarella, who was Argentina's captain in the 70s, but I'll probably go with a fella from Chile called Elias Figueroa, who his career spans the World Cup from 66 to the World Cup in 82. And he played top class in Uruguay, played top class in Brazil, could easily have gone to Real Madrid, and Real Madrid wanted him, but at the time he could earn more and play against better players probably in Brazilian football. An absolute immaculate defender. For the best on the continent at the moment, maybe back to Grêmio, Pedro Jeromel, who's an experienced defender, had time in Germany. Just picked up an injury in the week, and that'll be a big loss for Grêmio. He's a very intelligent defender as well as hard when he needs to be. But one to look out for the future. He's only 18. He's a Colombian who plays for Atlético Nacional. He's called Carlos Cuesta, and he reminds me a little bit of a young version of the greatest centre-back I ever saw, who's Franco Baresi. I know that's ridiculous praise. To call him the new Baresi is an absurd thing to say. But
Baresi was good,
he's
he was good.
Cuesta is a centre-back in that kind of mind. He's only 18, but there's a natural aura around him, a natural leadership. He's not particularly tall, but he reads the game so well. And at the age of 18, he's bossing his teammates around and organising the defensive line and showing terrific maturity. And he's very, very classy. I think he has a big future in the game, Carlos Cuesta.
And I do apologise for sometimes interrupting, but every now and then, from your regions, you mention a name that I would have heard of. And it's like our previous caller that was having a pop at Tim about transfer fees says, if you haven't heard from them, they don't count. Suddenly when you've heard about them before, then you think, oh yeah, he was good. He had to have been good for me to have heard about him. Yeah. Anyway,
if the Loin King has heard about him, that means he really has to be something.
I'm sorry, I've got to live that one down. Talking of which, Judith in Lincolnshire has now got a chant for the North Korean under-21 team. Do you know what it is, John? Any idea?
No, please, I want to hear.
Where the John Guns, baby, where the John Guns. Anyway, let's leave it at that. I do want to go to North Korea sometime. I might have just signed my fate in that respect. Having heard about some Brazilian players' predilection for the caffeine-rich mate drink, Pep Guardiola's insistence on a pizza-free diet for his players, and Jamie Vardy's alleged preference for vodka-based bevies. What do poor Jamie Vardy? What do the correspondents think about regional variations in players' diets and how these affect their performance on the pitch? Are there set pre-match meals, for example, and post-match recovery snacks unique to certain countries? And what changes have you both seen in players' diets whilst you've been covering the game? John, do you want to go first?
Well, of course, it depends on where you go. And there's still a very much regional variations of different countries. They tend to eat the local food. And this is a bit of an issue in Malaysia and Singapore because lots of Asian food is very healthy. You go to Japan and Korea and you get very, very healthy diets most of the time. But certainly in places like Malaysia and Singapore, there is healthy food, but the players like to eat a lot of fried noodles, fried rice, and especially the foreign coaches come in and they have a real battle on their hands trying to wean the players off, the things that the mother used to make, and that isn't ideal for football. But yeah, if you go to different countries in Korea, all the players eat kimchi all the time, and I hear it's becoming quite popular now, even in England. Kimchi is quite a big deal.
Yeah,
it's taken off all around Asia. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
And I mean, the players swear by this, and they claim all kinds of qualities. I think certainly in East Asia, Japan and Korea do very well because they have very healthy diets that keep them going for a long time.
Yeah, this question is from John T, by the way, Tim. I suppose it's all hotchy doggies over your side that the manager's got to wean them off.
Perhaps. Well, it's a really good question, actually. I mean, Sergio Aguero is a player who still, I think, he struggles to last the 90 minutes, and he doesn't often play 90 minutes. He's usually hauled off before the end. And lucky for Man City, he wasn't hauled off on that Rangers. But when he came over from Argentina to Atletico Madrid, they really had to work hard with him on his diet. And the things there were two things they were trying to get him off: red meat and fizzy soft drinks. Less red meat and drink more water. And that can be hard with the South Americans, and especially the Argentines and Uruguayans. Their red meat consumption is extraordinary. It's they're in those parts of the world, in south of Brazil.
It's up there, haciendas.
They're eating a cow a day, for crying out loud. And especially in Argentina, they go out for their meal at something like 11 o'clock at night. They've got half a cow jumping up inside them, during the night. It's no wonder that Buenos Aires is the king of That's right, yeah. Just your bully beef. It's no wonder that Buenos Aires is the city with more psychiatrists per square inch than any other city in the world. They're all half mad because they don't go to bed till the wee small hours with half a cow jumping up and down inside them.
So, Tim, you are naughty. Henry says, "What are your thoughts?"
It's just an observation.
I know. Okay. Henry says, "What are your thoughts about the Brazilian forward Ailton, who was a cult hero during his time at Werder Bremen?"
He's I think he had plenty of red meat. I think his diet wasn't the best. He was enormous. He had one of those players with a huge backside. He was. I remember seeing him one of my first years over here. He bounced around a few sides, and then with Guarani in '96. Strong left-footed striker. He couldn't stop scoring and went off to Germany after that. And because he'd never really played for a glamour club in Brazil, his career wasn't followed as it should have been, really, because he was a terrific striker and he had a wonderful record in German football and a fair few, and he was a really colourful character. A kind of larger than life character in more ways than one, and one who I'm sure is very, very much remembered in Germany, but has been totally forgotten in Brazil. And he was a good player and a good figure as well. So I think it's a shame he's not remembered over here.
Johnny, is Tevez going to return to China after injury? Warren wants to know.
Good question. I think some fans at Shanghai are hoping that he doesn't. He's been injured, and the club have let him go to back to Argentina for a while. He hasn't really settled in China. I mean, it seems like he didn't really want to go in the first place. and his play on the pitch hasn't been anything to write back to Buenos Aires about either. He looks not happy. The fans are kind of thinking, well, don't bother coming back because you're not very committed. But comparing him to Pellegrini, also a completely opposite story. He's been getting paid huge wages, but Shanghai Shenhua have had a poor season as well. They were hoping to kind of challenge for at least get in the top three, the mid-table, and it's been a very disappointing performance from the club and also the player, and I think it's not going to end well, really.
And Tim, Russell in Enfield wants to know, his team is Brighton. They've just acquired Jose Izquierdo from FC Bruges in Belgium. He's recently broken into the Colombian national team, and he wonders if you have seen him play in his early international appearance. He sounds a dynamic wide attacker.
Yeah, he didn't half crack a goal in against Cameroon in June when he first got in. I like him. He's squat little, usually a left winger, although he can play all across the attacking line. And what I like about him is he's got a goal in him. His scoring record is good wherever he's been. And another thing I like is he's already adapted to Northern Europe. Spent 3 very successful years in Belgium, so he's done the hard yards of adaptation to Northern Europe. Brighton will be a breeze for him. I think they need freshening up. They need a little bit more explosivity there in the final third. And I think he could do well for them.
Yeah, this very quickly from Martin in Cairns in Australia. Johnny, he went to Japan in an exchange for a high school. He saw that they had compulsory club activities there. Impressed by the quality of football being played. Is this high school method of compulsory club activities a viable way of people getting professional contracts?
Well, I mean, the high school system in Japan has a long history, and they have this huge tournament every year through a high school football tournament.
Okay. Well, that's it from us. Thanks very much. No, I can't get any more. Thank you.